silent their fall. I hear not a sound from the leaves floating down field and town. All around I see autumn's silent call. How silent their fall. I hear not a sound from the leaves floating down field and town. I hear not a sound. I see those floating down field and town. How silent their fall. I see autumn's silent leaves floating down field and silent their fall. I hear not a sound. I see those floating silent town. All around I see autumn's silent call.
All right, good morning and welcome. My name is Nicole Olson, and I serve on your Fellowship Board of Directors. I want to thank you all for being here today and extend a special welcome to any visitors. If you'd like more information about the fellowship, please visit the welcome table in the fireside room or sign our virtual guest book at uufames.org/guestbook. Whether joining us from home or here in Fellowship Hall, we invite you to stay after the service for coffee, where you can introduce yourself and join in conversation with kindred spirits. Some announcements for today. There's an upcoming lecture at ISU featuring Nicole Hannah Jones, who is the creator of the 1619 Project. It's being held next Wednesday at 6:00 p.m. in Stevens Auditorium. Check out your most recent weekly email for more information on this great opportunity to learn more in our journey towards racial justice. Also, the Death Cafe returns to the fellowship on Sunday, November 13th. Participants will gather around cafe tables for a light lunch and conversations about death. A Death Cafe is a discussion among equals, not a class or a support group. The movement is meant to counter the taboo of talking about death, normalize it, and bring the reality of death out of the dark and into the light. Learn more by stopping by the table in the fireside room or looking in your latest weekly email. So, on behalf of this caring, nurturing congregation, I welcome each and every one of you to this sacred space. Here we invite you into an experience of transformation, hope, renewal, and connection, which may inspire you to understand life in new ways. Thank you for joining us today.
Our opening words are from Reverend Marta Valentin. We come together today to honor the universal community of seekers to which we all belong. We gather today to share from our deepest place of safety, that we might nurture ourselves by celebrating one another. We call into our presence this hour our ancestors, whose love, labor, and commitment made it possible for us to be here now. Let us call one another to the table of abundance, that we may feed on these fruits that sustain us and ever ask us to grow. Let us open to this moment with hearts that have no borders. We light this chalice in honor of all souls gathered here, in our presence and in the great beyond. Please rise in body or spirit for our opening hymn, number 103, For All the Saints.
Hello, everyone. Ooh, scary. My name is Riley, and again, I am the RE helper. And so we're going to be doing our Time for All Ages stories. It is a little different this time, though. We do not have a picture book. We just have a story, but I want all of our friends down here just to kind of imagine some of the things that I'm talking about, because we have some great descriptions in this story. So I'm going to be reading The Almond Tree, retold by Faye Morganson. Talia's face was like a complicated map, full of ridges and wrinkles, and when she walked, she shuffled. Still, she had a twinkle in her eye, and she always had a kind word for her neighbors, her children, her grandchildren, and her great-grandchildren. She spent most of her days in her rocking chair, looking out over her garden. If she had a visitor, she'd share memories of the good old days, and when she was alone, she'd remember to herself. It was during one of those mornings alone that Talia surprised herself by coming up with an ambitious idea. She made a phone call. A few hours later, the doorbell rang. She directed the delivery man to carry the very tall, skinny parcel he had brought to the bare corner of the garden. He kindly helped her find the garden spade and pulled a lawn chair over. Slowly, very slowly, she dug a big hole in the ground. It was hard work. Now and then she'd sit on the lawn chair to take a break, but she would get back up several times until eventually the hole was just the right size. Slowly, very slowly, she shuffled and rotated the bottom of the tall, skinny parcel into the hole. Kerplunk! She sat back down and inspected it, satisfied. Slowly, very slowly, she began to push the dirt back into the hole all around the bottom of the parcel. That too was hard work. Over and again, when she got tired, she sat down on the lawn chair to take a break. Then she got back up, and finally, she was finished. She unwrapped that tall, skinny parcel, and there it was, a beautiful sapling tree. She sat down once again to admire it. About then, her neighbor arrived home and poked her head over the fence. She looked alarmed and said, "Talia, you be careful. What are you doing? Planting a tree? Ridiculous. Someone of your age. Is that an almond tree? It won't produce almonds for years. Kind of nosy. Talia laughed as she pointed at the very old tree in the opposite corner of her garden. Some of its branches were broken right off. Others were bent with age. Most of them were bare, even though it was the middle of spring. She said, I'm like that old almond tree. My great-grandmother planted it. I loved to climb it when I was a little girl. Its branches were broad and strong. I felt safe there. Then, when I was a young woman, I picked some of its delicate pink blossoms and decorated my hair with them. The neighbor began to smile. As usual, there was no stopping Talia or her story. When I was a mother, I picked the almonds, roasted them to perfection, and served them to my family. When I was a grandmother, I rested in the shade of the almond trees. Now I am a great-grandmother. Talia was looking very dreamy as she continued. I have lots of time on my hands. I sit and remember as I look out my window. Mostly, I am happy with my life. But a little while ago, as I sat looking out into my garden, I realized that I'd never planted a tree. Never. It just didn't seem right. I have great-grandchildren. Great-grandchildren? Asked the neighbor. Talia exclaimed, Yes, and they need an almond tree. Of course, laughed the neighbor, as she pledged to herself to do something for her great-grandchildren too. I wonder what that will be. Perhaps she will plant a tree. What do you think? And as for Talia, after planting the tree, she returned to her rocking chair to look out her window and smiled. The end. Now it is time for all of our friends to head to our classes or our nice celebration for the day. Let's go.
Good morning, Central Iowa. My name is Reverend A.J. Galazan. My pronouns are he and his, and I'm your interim minister. We've had some discussions recently about where the neighborhood of this fellowship begins and ends. And I've realized that this is a regional congregation. Some of you travel a great distance to be here with us. So I want to say good morning, Central Iowa, and thank you for wherever you are joining us from today. I'm glad to be back home in Ames after my study leave last week. I went on the Living Legacy Civil Rights Pilgrimage from Memphis, Tennessee, across the state of Mississippi. It was a deeply moving experience, and I will share more about my trip in the coming months. On my way to Memphis, I traveled through a part of Iowa I had never seen before. I visited the iconic American Gothic house in Eldon and the steamship town of Keosauqua on the Des Moines River. Keosauqua. The steamships are long gone, but the town remains. I also stopped at St. Genevieve, Missouri. Founded in 1735, St. Genevieve is the oldest permanent European settlement in the state of Missouri. It was founded originally by French Canadians, and it reminded me of the little villages in Quebec. I walked around the old cemetery and marveled at the weathered stones. The cemetery stopped receiving new burials in 1881, and the sign said there were 300 remaining monuments, but over 4,000 recorded burials. I guess it's up to the living to tend to the dead. Not everyone is remembered equally. Reverend Selena Fox, the senior minister of the neo-pagan Circle Sanctuary in Wisconsin, writes, as October turns to November, thousands of witches, Wiccans, Druids, and other pagans across America, Canada, Europe, and elsewhere observe the sacred time of Samhain. Samhain is a festival of the dead, meaning summer's end. Samhain is a celebration of the end of the harvest and the start of the coldest half of the year. For many practitioners, Samhain also is the beginning of the spiritual new year. With the growth and spread of Christianity as the dominant religion in Europe, Samhain took on Christian names and guises. All Saints' Day, or All Hallows on November 1st, commemorated Christian saints and martyrs. All Souls' Day on November 2nd was a remembrance for all souls of the dead. With the coming of Christian Spaniards to Mexico, the indigenous customs of honoring the dead at this time of year mixed with Roman Catholicism and gave birth to the Day of the Dead, or Dia de los Muertos, in early November. Samhain shares the ancient spiritual practice of remembering and paying respects to the dead with these related religious holidays of Christianity. Close quote. Today, we continue this ancient tradition in our own Unitarian Universalist way. We claim the proud heritage of our Universalist ancestors who preached that forgiveness was better than damnation and that all souls share this journey of life together. This is from the poet Mary Oliver. As deep as I ever went into the forest, I came upon an old stone bench, very, very old, and around it a clearing. And beyond that, trees taller and older than I had ever seen. Such silence. It really wasn't so far from a town, but it seemed all the clocks in the world had stopped counting. So it was hard to suppose the usual rules applied. Sometimes there's only a hint, a possibility. What's magical sometimes has deeper roots than reason. I hope everyone knows that. I sat on the bench, waiting for something. An angel, perhaps, or dancers with the legs of goats. No, I didn't see either, but only, I think, because I didn't stay long enough. Our theme for October is courage. We began with an invitation to come in and explore this community. We followed by honoring the courage to come out and share who you really are. And today we end the month as we come back to our memories by returning to the Feast of All Souls, when the thin veil between this world and the next is lifted for a brief moment. Immediately following our service today, you are welcome to join us as we rededicate the Joan Hill Lynch Bell in the Memorial Garden, just outside this fellowship hall. And special thanks to Sally Daub and Jan Vine for restoring and moving the bell to its new location. Please pick up a flower and proceed out if you want to be part of that dedication ceremony. The Protestant Reformation was a time of fiery and sometimes violent arguments between Catholics, Lutherans, and Calvinists. Contemporary Unitarians claim Michael Servetus as an early witness to the theology of the unity of God with the publication of his book, On the Errors of the Trinity, in 1531. This book angered both the Catholic Holy Inquisition and John Calvin's Reformed community in Geneva. Servetus was captured by Calvin, tried, convicted, and burned at the stake as a heretic on October 27th, 1553. More than 5 centuries later, there is now a memorial near where Servetus was martyred. It was built by the spiritual heirs of John Calvin, the Presbyterians, and serves as a confession and apology for this tragedy, a monument to the freedom of conscience in religious matters. It's never too late to say, I'm sorry for your loss. Like Mary Oliver, I love waiting for angels. I love wandering around cemeteries. Wherever I travel, I make sure to visit an old graveyard, to spend a few moments on a stone bench, waiting for something to appear. And I'm so happy your memorial garden here has a stone bench, and I have waited on that bench. I love cemeteries because they're open 365 days a year. You don't need an invitation. You don't even have to know anyone there. The dead always welcome your visit. Come as you are. Years ago, I was passing through Springfield, Illinois, hoping to visit the tomb of Abraham Lincoln. Unfortunately for me, it was Thanksgiving Day, one of the few holidays when the tomb is closed. And I think Lincoln was part of Thanksgiving, or maybe I'm confused. But instead of a throng of visitors, I found myself all alone in Oak Ridge Cemetery. It was a bone-chilling, breezy day with overcast skies and swirling leaves. I pulled my hood up and walked around the tomb, aware of some impending presence. It was then that I was greeted by a murder of ravens crowing down from me from above. I was no longer alone. Since then, I have come to expect that birds and cemeteries will flock together. In Texas, I was drawn to a 20-foot high angel of mercy looking down on a very plain tombstone. Intrigued at who should have such an elaborate monument, I discovered it was a young mother who died in childbirth, her infant daughter buried next to her. I expected to find a bereaved father somewhere close, without any luck. There's no doubt much more to that story. On a lighter note, here at the Ames Municipal Cemetery, I found a headstone with the heartfelt inscription, "Thanks for stopping by." I love that sentiment. Both the living and the dead appreciate an unexpected visitor. We will not be sharing milestones in our service this morning. Instead, we will be sharing touchstones, brief names and reflections of those we remember. This is not a time to wipe away all the sins or declare that the dead are miraculously better than we, the living. Our remembrances are most honest when we realize our common humanity and honor the many small blessings that come from each and every life. I do not believe that relationships end at death. As the survivors, we have the power to wait on that stone bench. We have the power to return to our past lives. And on this special day, the Feast of All Souls, we have the power to bring the dead back into our hearts and savor their memories. But remembrances cannot be forced. The dearly departed march to their own time. Today, let us listen for them. May it be so, and amen.
That's okay. Good morning. We will now give and receive the offertory. Please know that this morning, half of the non-pledge offering will be donated to the Ames Community School District to help students in need. The district seeks to empower students of all situations to their potential. They further this goal through student and family advocates that serve as resource liaisons, the Hope Pantry, where food and clothing donations are distributed, and assistive school lunch programs. The other half of the offertory will serve to support programs here in our fellowship that make this a community of transformation. We'll pass the basket here in Fellowship Hall, but for those at home, you can visit uufames.org/give to give your gift today. And if you are a visitor today, please know that your presence here is gift enough. In the upcoming section of the service, when we are invited to come up and mention the names of those that we would wish to remember, if you do not wish to come up to the microphone and speak, you can put a name on a slip of paper and put it in the offertory basket, and we'll have somebody else read it for you. Thank you.
chimes in the window, bells inside the clock, an organ in the corner, tunes in the music box. We sang while we were cooking or working in the yard. We sang although our lives were really hard. There was music in my mother's house. There was music all around. There was music in my mother's house, and my heart still feels full with its sound. She's got a soul piano, but my sister had the ear. She could play the harmony in any tune she'd hear. Now I don't play much talent, but I always love to play, and I guess I will until my dying day. There was music in my mother's house. There was music all around. There was music in my mother's house, and my heart still feels full with the sound. Those days run past so clearly, although I'm far away. She gave me the kind of gift I love to give away. And when my mother died, and she sung her last song, we sang in the living room, singing all night long. There was music in my mother's house. There was music all around. There was music in my mother's house, and my heart still feels full with the sound.
From Wendell Berry. We clasp the hands of those that go before us and the hands that come after us. We enter the little circle of each other's arms and the larger circle of lovers whose hands are joined in a dance, and the larger circle of all creatures passing in and out of life, who move also in a dance, to a music so subtle and vast that no ear hears it, except in fragments. Dear friends, we are the living fragments, the living witnesses. Today, as we approach this time of reflection, let us each bring our own memories to this assembly. And by doing our own part, may we create here a circle of everlasting love. Please come forward now as you are so moved and speak a name, offer a brief recollection, and pause. For those of you on Zoom, please write your memory in the chat with all. This morning, I remember two of my dear mentors, the Reverend Dr. John Cummins, who died recently at age 95 and marched with Dr. King in Selma, Alabama. I met him in the last few decades of his life, and he taught me it's never too late to find a new friend. And I also remember Reverend Rob Eller Isaacs, my seminary professor in UU history and polity, who inspired me to preach the good news of love and kindness, not from a book, but from my own lived experience. A good personal story is worth 1,000 words.
Charles Freeman Divalbus, brother, friend, and great traveling companion. My parents, Charles and Evelyn Divalbus, and my husband, Bob Richards Jr., all of whom loved me and mentored me and sustained me still.
I light this candle for my parents, Mildred Kyle and Kay Theodore Olson, and my brother and sister-in-law, Dennis and Kathleen Olson.
I'm bringing these butterflies, which we crochet for our family, for all the remaining family. And so I'd like to put this up on the altar for my brother Bill, who died last year, and my sister Kathy, who died about 5 years ago.
I remember my late wife, Georgine Morrison Shank, who died 6 years ago, and our second son, Edmund George Shank, who died at the age of 46.
I'm Nancy Tepper, and I would, of course, like to acknowledge my parents, Margaret and Harold Tepper. But I especially would like to mention children who were born into this fellowship who have died. One was Griffin Diedrichs, who lived from 1997 to 1999, died of a brain tumor. A few years later, his mother, Angelina, died of cancer, and it was her fear that Griffin would be forgotten. And this fellowship took up a collection which we used to buy the musical Orff instrument that we have in the closet for him. I also want to mention Maggie Ohana, who was born into this fellowship, who as a teen became Mac Ohana, and he died of suicide as a late teenager.
I would like to hold it close in my heart, the memories that I have of my three special angels, plus many others. The special angels are Vicki Lynn Van Valen, 6 months old, Lillian Grace Van Valen, 2 weeks old, and Richard Dean Van Valen, 74. And I will put their photos on the table.
I'd like to mention my mother, Flip Rudstrom Brenner. She's been on my mind because earlier this month I visited her gravesite in Bowabic, Minnesota, and got to see buildings and things and cousins that are all mostly still there. A lot as she left them when she left, I guess, in the 40s to go off to college. And there in the cemetery in Bowabic, there was one gravestone with rocks piled on top of it, which is something I always look for in graveyards. It's a Jewish tradition. It evokes the time when the Jews wandered to the desert and passed on after people died, leaving piles of rocks. And there was just one stone of someone I didn't know anything about, but you know why they were there.
I'm Lily Jane, and I rise to celebrate my grandmother, who taught me many of her best life lessons over cooking food in her kitchen, and always filled her home with music when she played her piano and sang along. And she's been gone, coming up on 20 years next April. And also my dearly beloved concert friend, Nikki. She was taken far too young at the beginning of her rise to her greatness, about 5.5 years ago now. And her love of Lilo and Stitch has permeated every single remembrance that everybody has ever left on her Facebook wall. So that just endears her in my heart to me even more.
My name is Bennett Sherman, and many of you have been around me, and this is when I get somebody to help me. Just trying to say it because it's very sad to listen to your this is, if you don't know her, is helping me to maybe get talking in the right way that I should, but like other people, I don't want to hear about my mother anymore. She was a wonderful, wonderful person who came here and was here for a long time as well. And some of you really remember that. Pardon me?
I do remember your mother.
Yes, thank you. Maybe you'll know other ones as well. She was a wonderful person who wanted to talk about everything, and she was a wonderful mother. You kind of want to not think about it, but it's wonderful, wonderful, wonderful thing. And unfortunately, she died here, not in here, but around here, and she was always looking for people that would help her and so forth and so on. But I just wanted to make sure that she was there, and she's here, and she will always be here. I'm sure, hope that that is the same with you and your people as well. Thank you very much.
I'd like to remember my grandmother, who was a source of joy and light all through my childhood, and my grandfather, who died before I was born, but who built the house and the farm that my family recently moved back into. So I'm quite grateful to his legacy.
Hi, I'm Jeff White. I'd like to acknowledge my parents who raised my sister and me in a turbulent eastern Oklahoma oil field town and brought us through with much love and compassion. And my father just died a very few years ago at the age of 99, happily singing with the nurses. So it was pretty amazing.
I'm Rilla Fox, and I am remembering my parents, Peg and Dean Ingram, and my in-laws, Hazel and Joe Fox. All four of them introduced me to what it means to mourn someone who has died. And I'm also remembering a dear friend, Linda Webner, who died 49 years ago, shortly after childbirth.
I'm Carol Spencer. I'm here to remember my husband, Carl, who died at the age of 83 on our 37th wedding anniversary 5 years ago. 5 days later, I lost my oldest daughter, Heather Hiskey, at the age of 43 to cancer. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Alan Miller. This is the recipe box of my mother's mother. Her name was Johanna Luisa Maria Wilhelmina Frederica Augusta George. She was an impossibly peaceful woman.
My older sister, Debbie Huntress, died a month ago. It's the first of our generation, and it's hard to even wrap your mind around it. I'm going to miss her.
I'm Klaus Niesen. I'm remembering my father, Heinz, and my sister, Claudia.
I'm sharing on behalf of our members who are joining us from Zoom. Carol B. says, in loving memory of Steve, our cousin, lifetime friend, Carol, Sharon, cousin, excuse me, then she jumps ahead. Grandmother, Vera Sowers, teacher, Bill Snow, our ancestors, and many others very dearly remembered. Bob Anders would like to remember my parents, Marge and Ernest Anders, my maternal grandparents, Marion and Ruby Evans, and my paternal grandparents, William and Caroline Anders. Jessa would like to remember my dad and his mom, my mom, sister, and parents, my other extended family, significant other, and clients who have passed. Irv would like to remember, I remember my wife Janet, who was always cheerful and spirited. We were together for 47 happy years and raised 3 wonderful children together. She died in January 2018.
Well, I'm Kay Berger, and again, I would like to remember our son, Dustin Lowell Berger, with the library that is here in the fellowship. That's his memorial, and his stone is out in the garden. He was a wonderful little boy. He died at age 8 in an auto accident. And we always shed a tear with our loss, but we also have a lot of smiles in our memory of him.
I remember my parents, Ollie and Larry Burkhalter, who were members here. And I also remember my former husband, Ted. I typed his dissertation on my brand new red Selectric typewriter, and it was on cold-tolerant corn. So this is for Ted.
I remember my late husband, Lester Gottlieb, who died in 2014 after suffering from multiple systems atrophy. His ashes are buried in a cemetery in California where we lived for 40 years. And on his stone, I had written, "Here lies Lester Gottlieb, remembered for his humor, his kindness, and his love of life."
On behalf of Zoom participant Mary Barrett, I want to mention my father, William Albert Barrett, whose birthday is today. He would have been 104.
Oh, hi, my name is Michelle. This is my first time
visiting here, but I'm already very touched by everybody. So I want to share the memory of my grandmother who died May 7th, about 5 years ago, for 2 weeks longer than the doctor thought she would have lived, because she was waiting for me to go back to China to see her for the last time and to see her other family members. So I remembered her last few days, and she lived just days and days longer than doctor thought because of her strength. And that's what I really want to remember of her. And this morning I even woke up with a dream about her. So like to thank her for still visiting me. Yeah.
Thanks. Okay, so I'm Jamie Gerganis, and I wanted to remember my dad who died 5 years ago. He was known as Uncle Bob to everybody because he just was the friendliest, and he was the best dad. He really was. And then I also have to remember my boys were born. My twins were born very prematurely, and Brennan died in my arms at 6 weeks of age. So I always remember him in my heart. So.
I'm Sarah Carlson, and I want to remember my parents, Arlen and Fern Carlson, who loved me. And I think they learned love from their parents, and so I want to remember each of their sets of parents as well. And also my brother, Peter Carlson, who died a year ago of leukemia. And here are a few others that people wrote on papers. I don't know whose name this is. My mother, Haley, today would be her 98th birthday. Heather Hiskey, Jim Cook, Jean and Beatrice Cook, Carl Spencer.
Hi, I'm Robin. I'd like to remember my father, Sidney Henry Newberry Jr., and my mother, Jane Archer Newberry. The big prism was on his desk in the office at home, and my sister and I would sneak in there to play in the sunlight through the window because we were not allowed in his office. But we got in there. And the other thing is something my mother loved. Just because I'm following you, they didn't necessarily have good parents, but they turned out to be good parents.
I'm Carol Elbert, and today I'm especially thinking of my mother, who died at the age of 88. And I'm thinking of my daughter, Lisa Elbert, who died at the age of 35 from cancer. And I'm also thinking of a longtime friend who died just this month, and her name was Jan Duncan O'Neill.
Can you hear them? Can you hear the whispers of the ancestors? We remember. Their stories are in these walls, in our bones, in the air we breathe. Their stories are in the touch of a calloused hand, in the melodies of the songs that we hum while washing dishes. We hear the whispers of the ancestors, how their stories touch our lives and call us into becoming. Join now in our responsive reading, When Death Comes Suddenly, by one of my mentors, the Reverend Dr. Kendall Gibbons. When death comes suddenly, taking just one friend, or in a magnitude beyond our comprehension, when bright and innocent lives are cut short without warning or mercy,
in agony and outrage, we remember.
When a long life closes with honor and thankfulness,
in reluctant submission and gratitude, we remember.
When bereavement and loss seem to be everywhere we turn and the world goes dark,
in emptiness and pain, we remember.
When help and comfort must be given to the afflicted and the work of our hands is needed,
in duty and sacrifice, we remember.
When arrangements must be made and the severed threads bound up,
in ritual and custom, we remember.
When it feels like nothing matters and life as it once was seems distant and unreal,
in sorrow and numbness, we remember.
When grief comes upon us in waves and the helpless heart overflows,
in sadness and aching tears, we remember.
When words at last become meaningless and the only peace lies inward,
in silence and solitude, we remember.
When communities come together and the hurt is shared,
in mutual comfort and consolation, we remember.
When a strain of music or a familiar image brings a gentle, wistful smile,
in tenderness and nostalgia, we remember.
When the Spirit of life beckons us to lift our eyes to all that remains true and good,
in dedication and trust, we remember.
When the lessons of mutual help and understanding taught by tragedy live on in us to bless the world,
in love and kinship, we remember.
When we come to honor those we have lost by learning to cherish more dearly those around us, in generosity and gratitude we remember. Please rise now in body or spirit for hymn 1064, Blue Boat Home. Our closing words are from Reverend Leslie Takahashi. We bring into our hearts all those who have gone before us, all those whose living in this world has prepared the soil for our living, all those whose being has enabled our being. Let us also remember those whose existence is seated in our lives today, not only those who are our physical descendants, but also those whose spirits inherit the love we sow, the hope we reap, the promised we harvest. And may those of us whose religious inheritance is freedom never rest until all who wish to be its children are sheltered. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. This we carry in our hearts until we are together again. And for those who want to join in the rededication of the Joan Hill Lynch bell in the Memorial Garden, please take a flower and proceed to the Memorial Garden. Go now in peace.